Okay. Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone to our Lunch and Learn today. Um, my name is Chris Lukine, and Gail DeVillas is on here. We are the program coordinators for the Unit 23. So we cover Jefferson, Marion, Clinton, Bond, and Washington counties. And we are having our Lunch and Learn to kind of give everybody a chance to learn some things while we're on break here, I guess, due to the COVID pandemic. So we would like to welcome Sarah Lee. She is formerly a master gardener, and she has devoted more of her hours more recently to our Master Naturalist program. But she's giving us the talk today on easy care native plants. And we'll go ahead and turn it over to Sarah Lee. Sarah, if you'd like to start sharing your screen.
Okay, let's see. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
But it hasn't, it's your screen, but it's not your presentation yet. There you
go. Right.
Yay.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome you all today to this presentation. And it's such a gray day out today that it'll be fun to think about gardening. So let's just jump right in here. I don't know how many of you are really familiar with what it is to grow a native plant. So we're going to start out just by talking about what we mean by native plants, and then we'll jump right into the plants because I assume that's why most of us are here today. So I'd like to show this article. It appeared in Farm Week a year or so ago, and I liked what this man had to say. He's a retired Illinois grain farmer, and he wanted to talk about how his attitudes have changed over the years, and that he now believes that allowing grasses, flowers, and other prairie plants will bring back a variety of wildlife into our lives and our world. And I just love that after a lifetime of farming, that this man came to this conclusion and shared that observation with us. So what is a native plant? Basically, it always has a lot of big terminology that come along when people start trying to explain what a native plant is. They might say it's indigenous to a geographic area, that it occurred naturally. And these things are true. Normally, you can assume it developed over thousands of years. And another thing is that it belongs to a peculiar ecosystem of a region. So what that boils down to is basically these plants were here before people came and started introducing plants from other places. So if that gives you an idea, I hope that's a better explanation. So when you say it's a native, it was here before people came in and started putting in things that maybe were not native. They might have moved around the natives, but they were here. They were here before we were here. And so this is just a little sort of an example of what an ecosystem might look like, because it involves everything. It involves the people, it involves the animals, it involves the plants, it involves the insects. The ecosystem involves all of those things. And in an ecosystem, all of them are working in concert together. If you remove one or the other, then you're going to change the music that particular ecosystem plays. So here's what a traditional landscape looks like. This is just a basic house somewhere, and if you look at the species that are present in this landscape, you're going to see in the front you've got boxwood, in the back you've got barberry, you've got some gold hickory privet, you've got spirea, you've got a climbing fancy sort of a clematis, and some sedum. So basically, none of these things are native. They've all been brought in. And for landscaping, the idea that people have wanted is something that doesn't get insect damage, doesn't have to be sprayed to keep the insects away. They don't want those things in their landscape traditionally, all right? So the native plants, some of them are naturally insect and disease resistant, but as you might imagine, a native plant in a certain ecosystem, why it probably has some insects that look for it, especially to eat or lay eggs or do something, because they develop together. So those insects might be finding a use for that plant. So this homeowner obviously didn't want any of that going on because they wanted a pretty landscape. Here's a cartoon I included just for fun. Most people think if they go native, this is what they're going to get. So this cartoon has lawn service coming in that's a goat, you know, that's going to just trim the grass, trim the bushes. I assure you they would, but I don't think we have to go this far to have a native landscape. We can still, you know, have a lawn. We can have nice shrubberies without it taking it to this extreme. So I like to introduce the topic of pest versus guest. So here we're seeing a monarch butterfly, which is one of our, lately the monarch gets talked about because it is a native type of insect to North America that's in trouble because the habitat where it could lay its eggs and its caterpillar, which you see over on the right, that is part of its life cycle, is going to need something to eat in order to survive. And we've arguably caused some problems with the habitat of this particular insect. So each person needs to decide what it is that they want in their landscape. So to me, the monarch butterfly in any of its forms is not a pest, it's a guest. So I'm interested in planting its preferred food, which is milkweed, and it will be my guest. I will never consider it a pest, but some people would. So in landscaping, you always have to ask that question with someone, you know, what are you after? If you just want a butterfly garden, well, the butterflies come along, they sip nectar and they're beautiful. And that's one thing, but the other side of that coin is they need a food source for their young so that there can be more monarch butterflies. So to me, that would not be a pest, but to some people, once their plants are eaten down to the ground, absolutely they would consider it a pest. This is a picture of some gardens up in Springfield. My sister-in-law reclaimed a spot that no one wanted up there, right in the heart of the city. Sunflower. She planted native plants. There's some coneflower, different things in there. It's kind of hard to see because it's toward the end of the season and they've been eaten on. But here's your sunflower. Here's a coneflower, and then we've got a lot of milkweed. And I pulled one of them out here and did a close-up so you could kind of see. This is the green milkweed. Some other ones here, if you were able to zoom in and look closer, which maybe you will if you look at this program later, you'll see that they've been eaten. So to Jenny, the monarch butterfly was her guest. It was not the pest. So if you know anything about the life cycle of the monarch butterfly, you know that it starts out as an egg, then it becomes a caterpillar, it eats lots of milkweed, and then it goes through some transformation into what they call a chrysalis. And inside that chrysalis, basically the worm dissolves into its basic elements, and then it reforms into this butterfly. So in this cartoon, the butterfly's explaining, I told you I was a beautiful winged creature trapped in the body of a disgusting worm, because it did come out and was a beautiful butterfly. So why do we want to go native? I don't want to offend anyone with this cartoon, but I thought it was kind of funny. It's got a monarch butterfly on the psychiatrist's couch explaining that it has an irrational fear of extinction. Well, what we've done historically, we've been treating symptoms, not the cause. And therefore, our monarch butterflies may actually be on the verge of extinction. So with Easy Care natives, we do have a lot of interest now in using the native plants. Many gardeners are interested, but they aren't sure about how to select and how to care for them. So Easy Care natives are going to give you, if that is you, it's going to give you an easy starting point. So you can collect plants that need relatively little maintenance. And once you start to feel more confident, then you can branch out into some more challenging plants. So these Easy Cares are going to give you a good starting point. The plants we're going to look at are selected because of overall low maintenance needs. They're plants that tend to have very few disease and insect problems, and also they tend to grow in a wide range of cultural conditions, and this makes them easy to grow. Shown a picture of this was a house that I landscaped at one point, and I used native plants in it. This is basically what that might look like. It grew up, it's beautiful. The lady that owns this home, she loves to tell me how much people comment on how beautiful her landscape is when they walk by. She's in a neighborhood where people walk a lot. And I say that not to preen, it's not a point of pride necessarily, but when I did this landscape, it was at a time where we saw more of the rigid, non-pest inviting type landscapes. And so they just agreed to what I suggested as a designer. And I watched it with interest as it grew, and it is a butterfly haven. I want to talk about seeding. I know that some of you probably have taken part in one of our prairie restorations where we used seeds to create a prairie, which is just a mecca of native type plants. And in this case, seeding worked. Arguably, however, you don't see results right away with seeding, and it can take a couple of years before you really can tell what you've got, and there's a lot of problems with weeds. And then also, if you plant plants that are vigorous self-seeders, that can be wonderful if you want a naturalized garden. So those plants are going to mimic the problem that we have on a large scale with trying to establish native plants, is you can't tell the weeds from the plants, and there's a bit of trouble sometimes with our native weeds that also you have to remember are looking for a chance to grow and take over. So it can be a maintenance issue if you try to plant plants that are vigorous seeders in a smaller traditional garden, and so you need to be careful. You might be better off starting out with actually planting plants on a small scale and staying away from some of those that are known to be vigorous self-seeders, like the tick seed or I'm trying to think of what another one is. Well, I will think of it in a minute. I just don't have a lot of them at the top of my head right now. The prairie bundleflower, that's one that's a vigorous seeder. I know anyone would agree that's tried to grow this. So this is just a house that might look like your house. There's nothing planted, a couple of evergreens. Normally we would put in a type of an ornamental planting that's easily maintained, easily contained, non-invasive, and we've had a lot of human intervention. There's nothing in this proposed plan that would be inviting to our guests. So remember, those are our insects that we're trying to help out and encourage. But with landscaping, you can always look at these forms, look at the shape of these plants. You can find something in the native palette that would replace these plants. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at the plants, not spend a lot of time on the actual landscape. Just think about the form of these plants. We've got basically, we've got an upright type of a tree form. We've got some smaller shrubs. And then we've got some perennial plants in this planting. This is what it looked like before. So what if we did replace these with native type plants? We have 4 basic groups that we're going to look at today. We've got grasses, wildflowers, and perennials, trees, and shrubs. So we're going to start with the grasses. Northern sea oats is Chasmanthium latifolium. You can read the scientific name. I'm not going to take time to really focus on the names. We're just going to kind of get into what these plants, what they're good for, and what you can hope to accomplish with them in the landscape. So we see the northern sea oats. It has an upright, narrow, kind of an arching sort of a form. Next door to it is a Karl Forest or feather reedgrass, which has an upright, more of an upright habit. This is a interesting combination because the northern sea oats is a warm season grass. The feather reedgrass is a cool season grass. Now what that means is if you plant a grass, it is either going to start coming up and blooming when it's cool. The grass will actually bloom when the soil is cool versus when the soil warms up. So this guy on the left, the feather reedgrass, is going to bloom when the ground is still so cool that your sea oats may not even be coming up. So you need to understand if they're warm or cool season. So the sea oats is going to be a warm season grass. One of the good things about both of these is they'll tolerate shade, and most of your grasses don't like shade. So if you've got a shady area, then try the northern sea oats. This is what is really cool about it, are the seed heads. Grasses are prized not just for the grass, but also sometimes for their seed heads. So this one has a beautiful arching form. They're good in dried arrangements. I've seen where people will paint them gold and just enjoy the heck out of them. This is what it looks like when it's green before it turns to that nice sort of russet fall color. That's what you might expect in the landscape. This is a variegated variety. It's called river mist that you can find available. Now we're going to move on to switchgrass. This is a staple of the native prairie. It prefers actually the wet prairie maybe more than the dry prairie. They can get to be 5 to 7 feet tall, but it's a clumping form. So this is going to not spread out. It's always going to be in a clump. And that has importance when you get into the landscape. If you remember back to the boring ornamental landscape we looked at before, you can choose this grass as a form, basically like kind of an uprighted, rounded type shrubbery. The nice thing about grasses is, I say this one gets to 5 to 7 feet. It's going to do that every year, so you don't have to worry about how fast it gets there. Every year it's going to give you 5 to 7 feet from the get-go. The flowers are kind of a broad and diverse sort of a riot of sort of frothy, feathery looks. So that's where it gets its name. It's a panic grass, basically. is what it is. And there are some nice varieties that are available. I particularly am fond of one called Heavy Metal and Shenandoah, if you want to jot those down. We're moving to little blue stem. I think that was a question as to how many of you actually have that in the landscape, and a few of you do. This is an upright grass. It gets to be about 3 feet in height. It's green in the summer, and then it turns kind of a beige color in the winter. It's a warm season grass, so you're not going to see your blooms until July to September. But it is beautiful in all seasons. However, it's kind of a floppy grass. It's not going to give you that nice rigid sort of a look that you saw just a moment ago in the panic grass. So I'm sorry, I heard thunder. Sorry, I got distracted there for a moment. A couple of cultivars that are available are going to be the Blues and Carousel. So I love the way that this looks in the fall. I want to put it in flower arrangements, and I think you would too if you had it in the landscape. But I do mention that it does tend to flop over. It hasn't done it yet. So in the prairie, these have other plants to hold each other up. So you just need to be a little careful when you're planting your native plant landscape, that you think about whether they can stand on their own or if they're going to need some help from some companion plants. Or else, if you don't care, if you have kind of a floppy sort of a landscape. Prairie dropseed is just an outstanding plant. It is a warm season grass, grows in a clumping, kind of an arching habit. They mentioned that it's 3 to 4 feet in height, but that includes the flowers. So where you see it here, it's used as a border, but the actual flowers haven't started to happen. This is what it looks like more when it does have the flowers, and then it gets to its 3 to 4 feet. However, if you notice, these are kind of laying over. They're not really standing up rigidly straight. So this is going to be a relaxed plant in the landscape. Again, it is what it is. You cannot make it, can't make it be rigid, but it is beautiful if you've got room for it. Couple of good varieties are going to be Chanticleer, and this actually, I'm sorry, what I'm looking at here is just another planting of the prairie dropseed on a mass planting. You can see this sort of a look. If you go over to the Missouri Botanical Gardens, they've done a nice job around that that Research Interpretive Center with the prairie dropseed. Wildflowers, these speak for themselves. This one is the New England aster. I'm not going to stumble into the scientific name of this plant, but just be aware that they've changed the scientific name, the scientific groupings of these composite plants so many times that sometimes you have to cross-reference when you're looking for them. And the New England aster is a beautiful, beautiful native plant. It's actually native to the eastern United States, which is where it gets its name. But you will see them growing in our area, maybe because people have brought them, maybe they happened naturally. It's hard to say. It's upright to floppy. They can be 4 to 6 feet tall, not a particularly small plant, but the flowers are just a knockout purple from August all the way until frost. And this is more of a bluish. The one you saw before had more of a violet cast, but you can get these in different cultivars that will have anywhere from violet to true purple to what I would call a periwinkle. False indigo is a zone 4 plant. That means that it can take our region also a little farther to the north. It's 3 to 4 feet. It might need some staking if you try to grow it in your landscape. Again, you may be able to find a cultivar that is more compact. I do recommend, whenever possible, to look for a more compact version of these plants, just because they can be kind of rangy and tall. Remember, naturally, a lot of them are competing in the prairie, and so you want to get up where you can get to the sun, either that or you need to be staging yourself so that you may come up sooner, maybe before some of the taller, more aggressive plants, so that you can complete your life cycle. This is also a beautiful plant. It flowers May to June. It does need full sun. It's a very drought resistant plant, but it actually will have an interesting seed pod. It looks kind of like a pea pod that will come along later. You see this in larger areas native to the United States, primarily in the eastern regions. This plant that you're seeing here is a beautiful variety that was actually the perennial plant of the year in 2010. It comes in purple, and it comes in a white type variety also. And here you're seeing these interesting seed pods. Part of the interest in these perennial plants is going to be their seed pods. There are some interesting cultivars that have come upon us. There's a yellow, there's a white, there's a purple, a kind of a dark purple. Purple smoke, twilight, prairie blues are a couple of the cultivars that you might look for, as well as Carolina moonlight. Black snake root, this would definitely be an accent plant in your landscape. When they flower, it's an erect flower pod, flower inflorescence, 3 to 6 feet tall. The flowers and the foliage are cut for different types of bold arrangements. It blooms July to August. It also will tolerate partial shade. You can see here that it's actually in a shady environment, so keep that in mind. It does like a moist soil, so if you have a woodland planting or some shade where you've got some moisture, this is an excellent choice for this eastern United States native. Here's a close-up of the flower. And I don't know where its name comes from. That's often debated, but many times these plants were used for some medicinal purposes. So it's always interesting to research. Google it. Joe Pyeweed or Eupatorium is a group of plants that are very easy to grow in the landscape. This one is large, 6 to 10 feet tall. Again, your local garden centers can help you out. Last fall had a group of plants that I took to show. I was just looking for whatever was in bloom kind of in the fall, and the butterflies found them. I don't know, there's some debate over whether using a cultivar is as good as maybe one that just occurred maybe out in the ditches somewhere, but I see the butterflies enjoying them, so it's hard to say. I'm just saying that in the landscape, this one is out in a freestanding bed, so it can accommodate a 10-foot tall plant. But if you're trying to use this in your home landscape, this may be all you have room for. The one that we're looking at here is called Gateway, I believe. Little Joe are also, these are both shorter and more compact for perhaps better use in the landscape. Rattlesnake Master, another bold character, 2 to 4 feet tall. The leaves are strappy and sparse, as you can see. Flowers are kind of a white-green color, but interesting. You know, you could use this as an accent plant for sure. in your landscape. It does like full sun and well-drained soil, but it will tolerate drought and periodic flooding that happens in some areas of your landscape. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but for a plant that can't tolerate the wet, that can be very bad. So this can take both. This is GM. It's called Prairie Smoke. The flowers are pink and kind of oddly shaped. They almost look like shepherd's hooks, with nothing wrong with them. That's just the way they grow. It blooms April to June. It likes full sun and a well-drained soil. So basically, it's going to do better in the cooler temperatures. It kind of finishes what it's doing, and it will recede into the landscape for the rest of the season. This one is called Prairie Smoke. It's got a little deeper hue to the pink. And then I think many of you may be growing the cardinal flower, an old favorite, and mainly because it gives you such a good solid red. And sometimes it's hard to find a good red in the landscape. So 1 to 3 feet in height. It behaves itself as far as its size. It'll tolerate partial shade. It'll do well around a water feature or a pond. The roots can even stand being submersed in the water. So it has a very wide range because it's very versatile. I would point out that it does have a shallow root system. So you might find it having some issues with frost heaving. So just keep an eye on it. If you have one of those winters where it warms up and then it gets cold again and into the spring, it can sometimes cause those roots to heave out of the ground. You might need to step on them and push them back in. Beautiful plant. The Missouri Evening Primrose. For some reason, this plant fools me whenever I see it out and about. I always have to look it up. But it is a low grower, which we're hoping for at this point. This one naturally grows 3 to 4 inches tall and wide, blooms June to August, likes full sun, good drainage, very good in a rock garden. So it doesn't have that many blooms, but what it does have are large and very, very showy. Here it is, a close-up. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the trees. Sugar maple, a very good native. Big tree, 75 feet by 50 to 75 feet, rounded or slightly oval. It turns a beautiful red fall color, red to orange. Maples have been getting kind of a bad rap lately because I think the silver maple has been taking over so much of our woodland, but please do not include the sugar maple in this criticism. It is not always easy to start. Our summers can be kind of hot, and it is more of a northern tree. Here's its fall color. As you can see, it's just beautiful. It does like well-drained soil. Our soil is slightly acid in this area, of Southern Illinois, so it does tend to do well. But a word of warning, if possible, I would get a seedling of the sugar maple that is grown from a parent stock that actually evolved in this area, because this tree does remember where it was grown, and it has some special type reactions. You may have trouble with the bark splitting if you try to grow one around here that was started in a northern area. So if you buy one in a garden center and you're not sure, a lot of times on these cold type loving plants, they will put a dot on the side of the trunk. And if you see a dot on the side of the trunk, that means north. So do orient that tree so that dot is to the north, and you'll have better luck. The river birch really is the only appropriate birch to grow in our area, and it's a dandy native plant. It does tolerate, as you might guess, both wet and dry sites. Interesting bark, kind of a peeling bark. This is a native version that we're seeing, and Unfortunately, as it gains some age and makes a trunk, you will only see this peeling bark on the younger wood, but it will actually look more like any other tree that you've seen. But that's just the way it is. You're not going to be able to have that peeling bark like you might see in some of the European varieties that are going to do well in our area because it's just too hot. But it will get 50 to 40 feet. It will be a shade tree, and you'll still see some of that interesting bark on the younger versions. We include hackberry. This is a native tree. It's a tough one. It will survive. It will grow 80 feet in height by 60. It has some native problems that come along with it. So witch's brooming being one of them. It's a kind of a fungal issue. It's a social problem though, and there aren't so many hackberries being grown in a town situation now to where hopefully that would not happen. But this tree can take it as far as poor soil, and it's easy to transplant. It's tried and true. So if you're going to use it for a street tree, just make sure you've got room for it. This is where it gets its name. It's got this small fruit. It is popular with birds, so you would be helping out some of your native wildlife with this tree. Kentucky coffee tree, another interesting tree, gets its name. The scientific name here, Gymnocladus, actually means naked branch. And what happens with this tree when there's no leaves on it is you basically have no head. So be aware that it's going to be a while before your tree in the wintertime is going to really look like a tree. And also be aware that it has a male and a female. So I do recommend planting the male if you can accomplish that, because if you have a male and a female, you're probably going to have a lot of volunteers coming up around the neighborhood. I don't know how I am for time, Chris.
You're fine yet. You have probably about another 10 minutes if that's okay, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
All right. Okay, well, we'll keep going then. I went pretty fast through the coffee tree. I should say that I love that tree. It's one of my favorites. I personally have a grouping of 3 of them that after 20 years are finally starting to look like trees in the wintertime. But when they put on this extremely compound leaf, I assure you, you have a nice, big, full, bushy looking tree. So it gets its name by the fact that the early pioneers were sort of desperate for coffee, and they would grind up these seeds that come on this tree and make something that resembled coffee out of them. I don't know, I've never tried it, but the seeds are very hard, I will tell you that much. Shingle oak. All right, we're going to enter into the problematic trees now. I'm sure looking at this tree, you would agree it is a beautiful tree. Its name comes from the fact that it was used by the early settlers to actually make shingles for the roofs of their structures. And up until lately, it's been one of the most awesome trees that you could grow. As you see, it's an oak. If you're familiar with oaks, usually they have highly lobed leaves. This one has smooth margins on the leaves. And so unless you know what to look for, you might miss it. It has been, I'm sorry, I thought I had another picture. And I don't know if I can go back. So I'll just leave it at that. I just want to say that the shingle oak is prey to the wasp gall in a big way. Which, if you're not familiar with the wasp gall, it's a problem that's been attacking some of our oaks where you have some large galls that appear all over the branches, and it has been so bad on the shingle oak that I would not really recommend planting it. And in this particular presentation, there's a couple that were not really included that I think are wonderful oaks to plant maybe instead of the shingle oak or the pin oak, which also has been getting those galls pretty bad. But I would recommend the willow oak. That is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful oak. And the white oak is still holding its own with these galls, although you might see some on any of the oaks, be aware. This is one pest that we don't really want to encourage. And I'm sorry about it. It's been so hard on the oaks, and I just think it's a shame that had to happen with the oaks. So let's move on we'll finish up with a few native shrubs. I think some of you have button bushes planted, and that's good. I love the button bush. It's a tough performer, makes a large, broad mound about 6 to 12 feet by 6 to 12 feet. If you've got room for it, the flowers are sweet. You can barely see them here. They're like a little ball. You know, I ran into this out in one of my old nursery fields one day, and I'm like, what is that? That's so sweet. I did not know what it was. And it's interesting, since I don't have the nursery anymore. We cleared a lot of it and let it go back to more of a savanna. And it turns out this plant is a staple in the wet prairie. And guess what I had out there? A wet prairie. So that explained what this button bush was doing out there. They do like full sun. They prefer the wet to the moist site. So if you use it in the landscape, you're going to have some control over the water. But if you have a place where you don't feel like you can water and it's naturally moist, kind of wet, this is another plant. Like with the rattlesnake master, you could put it out there and it's going to be fine. You're not going to have to fuss with it after it gets established. So here's a close-up of the leaves, and you can kind of see what that looks like. And here's the flower. I just think it's the cutest little thing. That's what I thought when I ran upon it, showing up on its own out in my fields. The dwarf Fothergilla is a native plant. Actually, there's larger versions of it, but I like the dwarf, and it's going to give you a reasonable plant for your home landscape, 3 by 3, kind of an upright with these beautiful stark white bottle brush flowers. So they bloom in early May, and if you stage it right, you can get some bloom going all through the season. So keep in mind that this is going to be an early bloomer for you. Also in the fall, it has a tremendous red fall color, kind of a scarlet. So it's going to give you some interest in a couple of seasons there. And just a sidebar, in our area, you get lots and lots of yellow in the fall. Maybe some orange, but it's hard to get a good solid red. So this one will give you some red, you know, in the fall. Some of the cultivars that are available are Blue Mist, Blue Shadow. So they will give you kind of a bluish fall, or a bluish color with the leaves in the summer also. And it is not a particularly one that invites your insect pests too. So if that's kind of in the back of your mind. But it does invite the butterflies. So all of these seem to be good butterfly flowers. The 9-bark, Physocarpus opulifolius. This is really a cold weather lover. It does need moisture, so do not put it in a super dry place where it's not going to be able to get any water. 6 to 9 feet by 6 to 9 feet. I call this the poor man's Japanese maple because it does give you kind of a russet, sort of a reddish color through the summer, so you can kind of get that interest in your landscape with the 9-bark. I don't know if you can see it very well, but these flowers actually have a sweet sort of a pinkish cast to them. So this is a green-leafed version, but when you get that sort of coppery red with these pink flowers, it is outstanding. Diablo is the version that has the reddish colored flowers. But just remember, it needs the water, so it will burn up on you if you don't have it in a moist area. And we have the arrowwood viburnum, another popular, great performer of our natives. 6 to 12 feet by 6 to 12 feet. I have one right now called Blue Muffin that has a neat flower. The fruit is a bluish color, which is where it gets its name. Very popular right now, so I have one I'm kind of excited about. The flowers are kind of a flat-topped cluster, and they're pretty, but really it's the fruit on a lot of these that are attractive. But they're also attractive to birds, so you're going to be supporting your bird population with this plant. Just don't plant it close to your clothesline, if you know what I mean, if you hang your clothes out. It prefers well-drained, moist soil, but it will tolerate dry soil, and it gets its name from the fact that the stems are extremely straight. And here's a picture of the fruit. So the birds have already been busy on it, it looks like. I don't know if you can kind of see these branches here and there. They're extremely straight, and the Indians would make arrows out of them, which is where it gets its name. All right, so Jerry's Nursery over in Breeze can help you source some of these things. They actually will sell to homeowners. And they have connection to a nursery called Bones Nursery over in Maryville. Bones will not sell to homeowners, so you've got to find a retailer who will help get these plants for you. But Jerry's can do that for you if there's one that you're interested in. And Bones has a vast list of native plants. So other than that, you might know somebody that's got one that'll let you dig it up and take it. And we all know we have those people in our Master Gardener, Master Naturalist stable of friends. So Grow Native is a good source to get ideas. That is actually their marketing tagline, Grow Native. And you can see some of the proven winners that they will offer for sale. All right, so questions. Can you hear me?
There is, yeah. Thank you, Sarah. You did a great job. I think one of the questions that came in the chat box, and everybody's able to get to the chat box, is from Kathy. Is it cultivars versus confused about using cultivars in native planting landscape, such as the varieties of false indigo? Is it okay to use these in Sarah's program, especially the false indigo?
Mm-hmm. All right. That is a question, Kathy, that's really up in the air right now. I think the scientists are doing research. They're trying to decide about using cultivars versus a true native that might have come up in a ditch somewhere, basically. And I don't think that the verdict is in. They're not exactly the same necessarily, because the cultivar might have been grown somewhere where it might be responding to a different zone, so that it wants to bloom at a different time, maybe than an insect might be needing a part of it. So the answer is, if you're really going to be a purist, then you want to go dig your natives up somewhere where they've actually happened to this particular geographic area. But I don't think it makes so much of a difference with butterflies as far as nectar feeding as it does with when they lay their eggs, and what's going to be available for their little caterpillars that hatch out, what they're going to want to eat. So generally speaking, this is my advice. When you're landscaping, you're trying to get something beautiful. And if you go with the natives that you might find growing in the ditches, or maybe at Marty's Prairie or somewhere, those are all from a native seed source, and that's one thing. But when you start using some of those, they are very tall. They're very floppy and rangy. And to use those, you're going to have an enormous landscape. So what I'm suggesting is there are cultivars available that are grown so that they're more compact. And I think you're just going to have to choose which master you're trying to serve. It's my experience, like I said, I showed up with some cultivars from Jerry's nursery last fall, and the butterflies got in my trunk of my car because they were so anxious to get to those flowers. So I don't know if that answers your question, but a cultivar basically is it's a example of that plant that someone has developed and grown beyond just what you would call the straight species. So they usually have a name like Blue Sensation that'll be in quotation marks after the scientific name, and that's how you can tell that it's a cultivar. A variety is a little bit different. It's actually a genetic variation that has developed in a different way. But for the cultivars, they're going to be in quotation marks, and I recommend going small if possible, smaller.
Okay, Carla Hazelhorse is also kind of on our panel. So if you have any other questions, you're free to type them in the chat box or go ahead and unmute yourself, and you can go ahead and ask a question of the panel that's open.
Do you want me to go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, I was just going to add that I have the 9 barks that she mentioned. I have both the native one as well as the cultivar, the Diablo. I found that when looking at them, they're in different locations in my yard, but in a major shrub border, the native 9 bark did attract more wild insects. I saw much more traffic on it, but it would have been too big to put in my landscaping in another location. So then I chose Diablo, which is the more of a mahogany leaf. I read a study that was put out recently that they did see less insect activity due to the coloration of the leaf. But when it's in bloom, I saw activity on both. So it becomes a question of, if you don't have the room for the native, which normally mine runs a good 8 to 9 feet tall and wide, then using the cultivar to me is another possibility rather than getting something that's totally non-native. They're beautiful bushes. I have many people comment and ask about it.
And I think that's just really, you just really put that very well. You explained it so well. You have to ask yourself, if you don't have room in your landscape for something that's 10 feet, then if you choose one of the cultivars, it's still better than going with an exotic type ornamental that is not a native plant at all.
Okay, a question that I have for either of you ladies. If you're starting out and you're starting your first native plant garden, or you're starting to use natives, do you recommend doing the wildflowers and the forbs first, or would you recommend going with shrubs or a tree first and then adding wildflowers and forbs second?
Well, of course, you have the plants. Sometimes plants come at you at a certain time and you can't do it all at once. But I do recommend that you start with a plan, because these plants really do well in a community setting. The native plants have developed that way. So I think they're happier if you can use a grouping. So I think planting them all at the same time is optimal, but if that's not possible, I would say that generally you're going to want to either plant early in the spring before for the shrubberies and the trees, either early in the spring or in the fall. But with the forbs, with the perennial type wildflowers, please do not plant those in the fall if you can help it, because they need some time for those roots to get initiated. And if you plant them in the spring, then they have all summer to build a root system. If you plant them in the fall, they're going to be subject to something that's called freeze drying. And that means that even if you water them in well, there's liable to be some air pockets that might, where the cold air might be able to travel down kind of and get at those roots. And you may kill your plant over the winter, and then there won't be anything to go in the spring. So if you do plant them in the fall, water them in really, really well and hope that you have a wet winter. Other than that, I think all of your, these plants, these native plants, I think they all do well with a spring planting. And then if you can let them move into the summer to establish their root systems. The trees and the shrubs, it doesn't matter so much. Everyone needs to be watered well, though, going into the winter.
Okay, thank you. That's great information. Is there any other questions?
I have one thing I'd like to say on the subject of honeybees. In defense of honeybees, which is another one of our insects that we're trying to help out, are the bees and the butterflies. If you have one of those super tidy lawns, this doesn't apply to you. But if you have a lawn like my lawn where you have a lot of clover, well, the bees really do benefit from the white clover. And if you just set your lawnmower higher, those things, they will do a little blooming in between your mows, and the bees really, really appreciate that. So that's my plug for the bees and untidy lawns.
Okay, well, we appreciate you ladies taking your time. You did a great job, Sarah. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, again, if you want to type your email, if I don't have your name, I see there's a few phone numbers on here. If you want to give me your email in the chat box, what we'll do is we can send you some of those information and send it along to you as in your email. Some of the handouts that she had that we couldn't send to you and prior to. And thank you again, Sarah and Carla, for helping us out today. Is there any last questions? If not, I'll stop recording. Gail, do you have any questions for them?
No, I was just unmuting just to say thank you and appreciate it, and continue to support this program so we get more and more folks on there for our Lunch and Learn.
All right, well, thanks everybody.
Thanks
For your time.
Everyone stay safe.